The day Elaine Cooper drove her rusted pickup truck down the dirt road to claim the land she'd been given as payment for a business debt, every farmer in Golden Fields shook their head in disbelief. Nobody thought a city woman with 2 children and 0 farming experience could survive on 150 acres of dead dirt, least of all the bankers who'd mockingly handed her the deed in lie of actual payment. But when harvest season came 18 months later, those same bankers watched in stunned silence as Elaine's crops broke county yield records dating back 50 years, transforming what they'd considered worthless land into the most valuable property in the region, a humbling reminder that sometimes the greatest success stories begin with someone being handed what everyone else thinks is certain failure. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The imposing glass headquarters of First National Bank of Glenfield gleamed in the late afternoon sun, as Elaine Cooper sat rigidly in a leather chair that felt too expensive to touch across a polished mahogany desk. Victor Harrove shuffled papers with manicured hands, his expensive suit a stark contrast to Hila's department store blazer she'd worn for important occasions since her divorce 3 years ago. Mrs. Cooper, we've reviewed all possible options for settling Marshall's outstanding debts. Victor's voice carried the practiced sympathy of someone who had delivered bad news countless times without feeling it. As his business partner and co-signer, these obligations unfortunately fall to you. Elaine gripped her purse tighter. Mr. Hargrove, I've explained repeatedly that I was a silent partner. I had no idea Marshall had leveraged everything. I've already lost my savings and my home. Richard Blackwell, the bank manager, entered with a folder. His expression betrayed a flicker of amusement as he exchanged glances with Victor. There is one potential solution, Victor said. Accepting the folder, the bank recently foreclosed on a property in Golden Fields, 150 acres, formerly known as the Miller Farm. Elaine frowned. A farm? What would I do with a farm? Victor slid photographs across the desk. They showed overgrown fields, a weathered farmhouse with peeling paint and dilapidated outbuildings. The property has been unworked for years. Soil conditions are challenging, but as a deed transfer, it would satisfy the remaining debt obligations behind Victor. Richard coughed lightly, covering what sounded suspiciously like a chuckle. I don't know the first thing about farming, Elaine said. Well, then perhaps you could sell it. Victor suggested smoothly, though. I should mention property values in that area have been depressed, however it's this, or bankruptcy proceedings. Mrs. Cooper. Elaine studied the photos again. Despite the obvious neglect, there was something about the old farmhouse that reminded her of her grandmother's place in the country where she'd spent childhood summers. I'd need to think about. I'm afraid we require an answer today. Victor interrupted the foreclosure. Auction is scheduled for tomorrow, unless we process this transfer. Elaine looked up, noticing for the first time the subtle smirk playing at the corner of Victor's mouth. She glanced at Richard, who quickly composed his features. This isn't actually worth anything, is it? She asked quietly. That's why you're so willing to accept it as payment? Victor's smile never wavered. It satisfies the debt on paper, Mrs. Cooper. What you do with it afterward is entirely your concern. 30 minutes later, Elaine stood on the bank steps, a folder containing property deeds clutched in. Her hand through the glass doors, she could see Victor and Richard laughing, not even bothering to hide their amusement now that she had left in her car. Elaine opened the folder again. A handwritten note had been added to the property description. Soil acidic water table compromised from previous pesticide use, deemed agriculturally non-viable by county assessment. She closed her eyes, fighting back tears at 42 with 2 children, depending on her and her marketing career derailed by her exartners. Financial deceptions. She had just traded genuine debt for a worthless piece of land and whatever remained of her dignity. 3 days later, Elaine's sedan crawled down a dusty road, followed by a small moving truck containing what remained of their possessions after downsizing from their suburban home in the passenger seat. 16-year-old Megan stared sullenly out the window, her earbuds firmly in place in the back. 9-year-old Tyler fidgeted with his handheld game. Mom, there's no signal out here, Megan complained, removing one earbud. And you promised the new place would have internet. It will, Hila assured her, trying to sound confident. The service technician is. Coming tomorrow. I still don't understand why we have to live on a stupid farm, Tyler muttered, not looking up from his game. I'm going to have to change schools again. Elaine gripped the steering wheel tighter. I know this isn't what any of us planned, but we have to make the best of it. The house is paid for, no rent, no mortgage. We just need to hang on until I can find a new job. As they crested a small hill, the Miller farm. Now the Cooper farm came into view. Elaine tried to see it through, hopeful. Eyes a two-story farmhouse with a wide front porch, several outbuildings including a barn, and what appeared to be a greenhouse with most of its glass missing, all surrounded by fields that hadn't seen a plow in years. She pulled up to the house, putting on a brave smile for her children. Here we are, our new home. Megan looked up from her phone, her expression transitioning from indifference to horror. You're kidding, right? This place is falling apart. Tyler pressed his face against the window. It looks haunted. It's not haunted, Elaine said firmly, getting out of the car. It just needs some love. As they approached the porch, the front door of the farmhouse opened. An elderly man stepped out, his weathered face a map of deep lines beneath a faded cap. Didn't expect you folks so soon, he said, his voice growly from years of use. Been airing the place out. Smells better than it did yesterday, at least. Elaine extended her hand. You must be Mr. McCormick. The bank mentioned you'd be dropping off the keys. Gerald McCormick nodded, shaking her hand with calloused fingers. Me and the Miller place go back 50 years, helped old Jim build that barn. When I was younger than your boy there. His eyes swept over Tyler, who partially hid behind his mother. The bank said the utilities were still connected. Elaine said they are, but the well pump's temperamental, might want to stock some bottled water, until you figure it out. Gerald handed her a ring of keys, his expression unreadable, town saying Victor Harrove must have had a stroke of conscience giving you this place. Elaine's smile tightened, something like that. Gerald studied her for a moment. You planning to farm it? I haven't decided yet. A pickup truck slowed on the road, the driver clearly curious about the activity at the long vacant property. Gerald raised a hand in greeting, and the truck continued on. That's James Wilson Farms, the property to the east, decent fellow, but set in his ways. Gerald adjusted his cap. Folks around here have their own ideas about this land. Most think it's beyond saving. Megan, who had been inspecting the porch with obvious disdain, turned to Gerald. Why, what's wrong with it? Gerald seemed to measure his words before responding. Miller wasn't much for modern farming methods, used every chemical known to man, trying to squeeze yields from it. When that failed, he tried some experimental pesticides, not approved for agricultural use. Elaine felt her heart sink further. The bank didn't mention that. Bank wouldn't. Gerald said simply, Harrow's been trying to unload this property for years. Nobody local would touch it. Megan shot her mother an accusatory look that spoke volumes. Listen, Gerald said softer now. If you're planning to stay, come by the McCormick place tomorrow. Blue mailbox about 2 mi west. My Dorothy makes a decent pie, and I might have some old furnishings you could use until you get settled. After he left, Elaine and the children entered the house. Despite Gerald's efforts to air it out, decades of neglect hung in the air. The rooms were empty except for an ancient refrigerator that hummed loudly, and a kitchen table that had seen better days. This is worse than I thought, Elaine admitted, running her hand over a dusty counter. Can we go to a hotel? Tyler asked, hopefully. No, honey, we need to save our money. Elaine forced a smile. Think of it as camping. We have our sleeping bags until the moving truck arrives. Megan leaned against the wall, arms crossed. How long do we have to stay here for real? Mom. Elaine looked around the kitchen, mentally calculating repairs against their dwindling savings. I don't know yet, but this is what we have right now, and we need to make it work. Over the next few days, Elaine discovered just how completely the bank had misrepresented the property. The roof leaked in 3 places. The plumbing worked intermittently at best. The fields, which had appeared merely overgrown in the photographs, were actually riddled with debris and patches of strange discoloration. On their 5th morning, while the children were still sleeping, Elaine sat on the porch steps with a cup of coffee, watching the sunrise over fields she now owned, but couldn't possibly farm. Her laptop sat beside her, open to job listings in Glenfield. But the prospects were bleak without reliable transportation. Their one car needed repairs. She couldn't afford a truck pulled into the driveway, dust billowing behind it. Gerald McCormick stepped out carrying a large paper bag. "Brought you some fresh eggs and bread," Dorothy insisted. "Thank you," Elaine said, genuinely touched. "That's very kind." Gerald settled beside her on the steps, his knees cracking as he lowered himself. "Been watching you these past days. You're not running back to the city." It wasn't a question, but Elaine answered anyway. "Can't sold everything to settle debts. This is it for us now." Gerald nodded, unsurprised. "Figured as much when I saw you fixing that garden patch yesterday." Elaine laughed softly. "Just trying to grow some vegetables. To cut down on grocery bills. I have no illusions about farming." This land. Gerald was quiet for a moment, looking out over the fields. "You know, most everyone says this. Soil's dead, too much chemical damage, but soil's a funny thing, given the right. Carrot can come back, Mr. McCormick. I appreciate the optimism, but I wouldn't even know where to begin. Call me Gerald," he said, standing with some effort, "and beginning's the easy part. It's the not giving up. That's hard." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small jar of soil. "Took this from your Northfield yesterday, been testing it." Elaine accepted the jar, unsure what she was supposed to see. "It's not dead." Gerald continued. "It's dormant. There's a difference." He headed back to his truck. "Come by the farm this afternoon if you want. I'll show you what I mean." After he left, Elaine sat holding the jar of soil, wondering if the old farmer was simply being kind, or if he genuinely saw something in this land that everyone else had missed. Inside the house, she heard Tyler's excited voice. "Mom, the internet guy is here." They found the house for the first time since they'd arrived. Elaine felt a tiny spark of something that might have been hope at the First National Bank of Glenfield. Victor Hargrove was reviewing property acquisitions when Richard knocked on his office door. "She's still there," Richard reported. "Taking a seat. The Cooper woman been almost a week now." Victor looked up, mildly surprised. "Really? I figured she'd cut her losses by day 3, apparently." "Not Jenkins drove by yesterday, said she was planting some kind of garden," Victor chuckled. "A garden on that toxic wasteland? Well, I suppose it's good entertainment for the locals. Should we be concerned?" Richard asked. "If she somehow finds out what's under the East Field, who's going to tell her? Nobody local wants that information getting out. Besides, it would take serious capital to extract anything valuable from that property, which she clearly doesn't." Victor shuffled his papers dismissively. "No, I think Mrs. Cooper will provide a few weeks of rural amusement before reality sets in. Then we can approach her about buying it back at a fraction of what she owed us." Richard nodded, but his expression remained thoughtful. "What about McCormick? I heard he's been stopping by." "Gerald McCormick is a relic," Victor said. "Even if he does fill her head with farming fantasies, what's she going to grow? That land won't support commercial crops. We made certain of that 2 decades ago, if you say so." Richard conceded, standing to leave. "I do say so," Victor confirmed confidently. "By harvest season, Elaine Cooper will be begging us to take that worthless dirt off her hands." As the door closed behind Richard, Victor turned to look out his window at the prosperous town of Glenfield. From his vantage point, he could just make out the distant hills where the Cooper farm lay. His family's bank had systematically acquired most of the struggling farms in the region over the past decade, consolidating them into viable commercial operations or selling them to developers. The Miller property was one of the final pieces in that puzzle, a piece he had carefully devalued. Through strategic loans and foreclosures, no city woman with 2 kids was going to interfere with plans that had been decades in the making. Victor was certain of that. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The McCormick homestead stood in stark contrast to Elaine's property. Neat fences enclosed well-maintained fields, and the 2-story farmhouse had a fresh coat of white paint. As Elaine parked her car, she felt a pang of envy mixed with determination. Gerald emerged from a red barn, wiping his hands on a rag. "You came good." He nodded toward the house. "Dorothy's inside with your kids. Boys already found the tractor models I collect." Elaine hesitated. "I didn't bring the children." "Of course you did. Dropped them off 20 minutes ago." Girl said, "You sent them ahead while you finished a phone call." Panicked, Elaine rushed toward the house, Gerald following at a more measured pace. Inside, she found Tyler sitting at a kitchen table, carefully examining miniature farm equipment, while an elderly woman placed cookies on a plate beside him. No sign of Megan. There you are, Dorothy McCormick said warmly. Your boy has excellent manners. The teenage one went out to the garden. Relief washed over Elaine. I'm sorry they weren't supposed to. Mom, look at these. Tyler interrupted, holding up a die-cast combined harvester. Mr. McCormick has every kind of farm machine ever made. Dorothy patted Elaine's arm. Children are always welcome here, too quiet. Otherwise, she handed Elaine a glass of iced tea. Gerald said, You're living at the Miller place, brave woman. Before Elaine could respond, Gerald beckoned from the doorway. Come on. Daylight's wasting outside. They found Megan kneeling in a vegetable garden beside a greenhouse examining a tomato plant with unexpected interest. Your daughter knows her plants, Gerald commented, asked intelligent questions about our irrigation system. Megan stood brushing dirt from her knees. They have an adjustable drip system that uses 30% less water than conventional methods. Her enthusiasm faded into her usual teenage indifference when she noticed her mother's surprise. I did a project on sustainable agriculture last semester. Gerald led them to his truck. Thought we'd look at your Northfield, most promising section of your land during the short drive back. To the Cooper farm, Gerald explained soil composition with the precision of someone who had spent a lifetime studying it. Most farmers around here grow the same crops year after year, depleting specific nutrients your land's previous owner went, further basically poisoning it with unregulated chemicals. Then how could it possibly be promising? Elaine asked Gerald, parked at the edge of her property. Because underneath the damaged topsoil is something special. He grabbed a shovel from the truckbed. Miller's mistake was forcing the land to grow what he wanted, instead of asking what it wanted to grow. He led them to an unremarkable section of overgrown field and began digging about 2 ft down. The soil changed color dramatically, becoming darker and richer looking. See that Gerald scooped some into his palm. Clay loam subsoil, unusual for this region. Most farms around here have sandy subsoil that doesn't hold nutrients well, but this, he let it fall through his fingers, this has potential. Megan knelt beside the hole, her interest genuine now. But if it's under 2 ft of toxic soil, what good is it? Smart question, Gerald approved, and that's where most folks gave up. But there are methods to remediate. Damaged soil takes time. Special plantings, proper amendments. We don't have time, Elaine said quietly. Our savings will barely last 3 months. Gerald looked at her thoughtfully. What if you could grow something this season? Something that could tolerate the existing conditions while beginning the remediation process. Is that possible? Elaine couldn't hide her skepticism. There's a variety of sunflower that extracts toxins from soil, also produces marketable seeds and oil. It's labor-intensive and not many around here bother with it, but with your limited acreage might be manageable. Megan was already typing on her phone. He's right, Mom, phytoremediation. It's a legitimate technique. Gerald smiled faintly. Agricultural Extension Office has a soil testing service, $20 per sample, worth knowing exactly what you're dealing with for the first time since arriving in Golden Fields. Elaine felt a glimmer of genuine possibility. What would I need to get started? Equipment, seeds, knowledge. Gerald counted off on his fingers. I can help with the knowledge part. Equipment, he considered Winter's farm supply. Might have some older machinery. You could lease reasonably, and the seeds, Elaine pressed. That's where it gets tricky. Special varieties, not cheap. Gerald hesitated. There's a grant program through the State Agricultural Department for reclaiming damaged farmland. Deadlines next week. Megan looked up from her phone. It says here applicants need to demonstrate agricultural experience or training, which I don't have. Elaine concluded. No, Gerald agreed. But I do, and I know the fellow who reviews the applications. Tyler, who had been quietly listening, suddenly asked, If we plant these special sunflowers, will our farm look like the pictures of France with fields of yellow flowers? Gerald chuckled. It surely would, like gold stretching to the horizon. I want to see that. Tyler decided firmly. Can we do it, Mom, please? Looking at her son's hopeful expression, Megan's unexpected engagement, and Gerald's measured confidence, Elaine made a decision she hoped she wouldn't regret. I guess we're going to try growing sunflowers. The following Monday, Elaine sat in the waiting area of the Glenfield Agricultural Extension Office, nervously reviewing the grant application Gerald had helped her complete. Benjamin Foster, The agricultural agent was a young man with an earnest demeanor and wire-rimmed glasses. "Mrs. Cooper," he said, offering his hand, "Gerald McCormick speaks highly of you." In his office, Benjamin reviewed her application. "FT remediation is an excellent approach for that property. I've been hoping someone would attempt it. You know the Miller farm?" Elaine asked. "I've analyzed soil samples from most properties in the county. The Miller land has challenges but also unique potential." He hesitated, though I should mention that several commercial operations have expressed interest in that area, primarily for non-agricultural development, commercial operations like Victor Harov's investment group. Benjamin adjusted his glasses uncomfortably. I couldn't comment specifically, but yes, there are parties who have been consolidating properties in Golden Fields. For what purpose? That's not information they're required to disclose to our office. Benjamin tapped the application. "This looks promising, but the committee will want to see credentials. Gerald's sponsorship helps, but they'll question your commitment as a new resident with no farming background." Elaine straightened in her chair. "Mr. Foster, 3 weeks ago, I was a marketing executive with a comfortable suburban home. Now I'm living in a farmhouse with a leaky roof because it's literally all I have left. If that doesn't demonstrate commitment, I don't know what does." Benjamin regarded her thoughtfully. "The grant decision takes about 2 weeks. In the meantime, I'd be happy to provide some educational materials and soil testing kits." Driving back to Golden Fields, Elaine stopped at Winter's Farm Supply. The bell jangled as she entered the store, filled with everything from garden tools to massive equipment parts. Samuel Winters, a balding man in his 60s, looked up from behind the counter. "Can I help you? I'm Elaine Cooper. I recently acquired the Miller property." Samuel's expression shifted subtly. "Heard someone bought that place, didn't realize it was." He seemed to reconsider his words. "What can I do for you today?" "Mrs. Cooper, I need basic farming tools, nothing fancy, and possibly information about leasing small equipment for planting sunflowers." Samuel raised his eyebrows. "Sunflowers on the Miller land?" "Yes, for PHTO remediation. Fancy a word for a city woman." Elaine stiffened. "I'm a quick study, Mr. Winters." Samuel seemed to appraise her more carefully. "Gerald put you up to this. Gerald McCormick has been kind enough to offer advice. The decision to farm the land is entirely mine." After a moment, Samuel nodded. "Well, you'll need more than advice. That soil won't give up crops easily." He came around the counter. "Let's start with the basics. Hand tools you can afford now, and we'll discuss equipment options once you get a better sense of what you're taking on." As Samuel gathered tools, the store door opened. James Wilson, the neighbor Gerald had pointed out days earlier, entered with his wife Olivia. "Morning, Sam," James called, then stopped short when he noticed Elaine. "You must be the new owner of the Miller place, Elaine." "Cooper," she confirmed, extending her hand. James shook it briefly. "James Wilson. This is my wife Olivia. We farm the adjacent property to the east. Mrs. Cooper is planning to grow sunflowers," Samuel announced, "for PHO. Something phytoremediation." "Elaine," supplied James, exchanged glances with his wife. "That's ambitious for someone new to farming." "I'm aware of the challenges," Elaine responded evenly. "James," Olivia chided softly, then turned to Elaine. "Ignore my husband. He's suspicious of new ideas. We've seen the moving truck at your place. Do your children need anything? School supplies, improper boots?" The kindness in her voice nearly brought tears to Elaine's eyes. "That's very thoughtful. We're managing. But thank you." Community dinner at the Golden Fields Community Center this Friday. Olivia continued. "Nothing formal, just a potluck. You should come meet your neighbors properly." James looked like he might object but remained silent. "We'll try to make it." Elaine promised, though the thought of facing a room full of skeptical locals was daunting after completing her purchases, spending more than she'd budgeted, but less than she'd feared. Elaine drove home with a truck bed full of basic farming implements as she turned onto the dirt road leading to her property. She noticed a black sedan parked near her mailbox. A man in an expensive suit was examining her land through a small pair of binoculars. Elaine pulled up beside the car. "Can I help you with something?" The man lowered the binoculars, momentarily startled. Mrs. Cooper?" "I presume Charles Montgomery." He offered a business card that identified him as Chief Acquisition Officer for Midwest Regional Development. I was just admiring your property from my private road with binoculars. Montgomery smiled smoothly. Professional habit. I evaluate land for development potential. This is a working farm, not for sale or development. His smile didn't falter, of course, but should circumstances change, my company would be very interested in acquiring this parcel. It's strategically located for our purposes. What purposes various development options are being considered? He glanced at her truck full of tools. I understand you're attempting to farm this land. Admirable, but perhaps unrealistic given its condition. We'd be prepared to offer a fair price, allowing you to relocate somewhere more suitable. Elaine felt a chill. Despite the warm day, as I said, Mr. Montgomery, this property isn't for sale to you or anyone else. Everyone has a price, Mrs. Cooper. He handed her a sealed envelope. Our preliminary offer, please review it at your convenience. I'll be in touch. As he drove away, Elaine opened the envelope. The figure inside was substantial enough to buy a modest home in Glenfield and still have money left over. For a moment she was tempted. Life would certainly be easier. She looked up at the farmhouse where Tyler was waving. From the porch at the fields, Gerald believed could be reclaimed at the distant shape of the McCormick farm, where someone had seen potential in this land. And in her, slowly, deliberately, she tore the offer in half that evening, as Elaine and her children ate dinner at their kitchen table. She told them about her encounters that day. It seems our property is more interesting to some people than I realized. Megan looked thoughtful. Why would developers want land with contaminated soil? Good question. I intend to find out. Elaine turned to Tyler. How would you feel about going to a community dinner on Friday, meet some of the local families? Tyler considered this. Will there be other kids? I'm sure there will be. Will we bring food? We should bring food if it's a potluck. Elaine smiled at her son's understanding of social protocols. Yes, we'll bring something. I'm not going. Megan stated flatly. I have zero interest in hanging out with a bunch of farmers who think we're a joke. They don't think we're a joke, Elaine began, then sighed. Okay, some probably do, but others like Mrs. Wilson and the McCormicks have been kind. Mom found out the banker guys who gave us this place have been buying up all the farms around here, Tyler informed his sister. They're like the bad guys in a movie. Megan rolled her eyes but looked intrigued despite herself. So what's the plan? We're seriously going to try farming sunflowers, we are. Elaine confirmed. If the grant comes through, we'll lease equipment and purchase specialized seeds. If not, she hesitated, we'll find another way. What about jobs? Megan asked. You said we need income before any crops could possibly produce money. I've applied for some remote marketing positions, and the Crossroads Diner in town is hiring part-time help. Megan stared at her mother. You're going to wait tables with a master's degree in marketing. I'm going to do whatever it takes to make this work. Elaine replied firmly. We have a roof over our heads and land with potential that's more than some people have. Later, after the children had gone to bed, Elaine sat on the porch with her laptop researching sunflower varieties and phytoair remediation techniques. The night was quiet except for crickets and distant farm equipment, a stark contrast to their former suburban neighborhood. Her phone buzzed with a text from Gerald. Spoke to Ben Foster. Grant looks promising. Start clearing Northfield tomorrow. If weather holds, she texted back her thanks, then opened a blank document and began typing Cooper Farm Reclamation Plan at the top. She wrote Phase 1 sunflower planting and initial soil remediation. For the first time since arriving in Golden Fields, Elaine felt something more than desperate determination. She felt the faintest stirring of genuine hope. The Golden Fields Community Center bustled with activity as families gathered for the monthly potluck dinner. Picnic tables, covered with checkered cloths, held homemade dishes, while children darted between clusters of adults engaged in conversations about weather forecasts and crop conditions. Elaine stood in the doorway, a homemade apple pie balanced carefully in her hands. Tyler pressed against her side. 2 weeks had passed since their arrival in Golden Fields, and despite her best efforts, the Cooper family still carried the unmistakable aura of outsiders. There are the McCormicks, Tyler pointed. Can I go say hi? Stay where I can see you, Elaine cautioned as he darted off toward the elderly couple. Dorothy waved warmly, while Gerald nodded in acknowledgement. Several heads turned to observe the newcomer conversations, momentarily pausing before resuming with greater intensity. You came, Olivia Wilson approached, relieving Elaine of the pie. I'm glad these gatherings can be intimidating for newcomers, but they're the heart of Golden Fields. Megan refused to join. Us Elaine admitted teenage rebellion. My oldest was the same at that age, Olivia consoled. Now she runs our farm's business operations. Come, I'll introduce you. Around the next half hour was a blur of names and faces, some openly curious, others politely reserved, a few unmistakably judgmental. Elaine shook hands with Mayor Helen Patterson, a formidable woman in her 60s whose family had farmed in the region for generations. She met Cassandra Cassie Miller, who owned the Crossroads Diner, and as Olivia whispered, knew everything about everyone in 3 counties. Cassie sized Elaine up with shrewd eyes. Heard you're trying to resurrect the Miller place. Ambitious, foolhardy, some might say. Elaine replied with a self-deprecating smile that earned her a nod of approval from the diner owner. Heard you applied for that state remediation grant? Cassie continued. Bold move. Elaine's surprise must have shown on her face because Cassie laughed. Honey, I serve breakfast to everyone who matters in this town. Information flows like coffee at my place. Is there anything you don't know about me? Elaine asked, only half joking. Cassie considered this seriously. Don't know if you can actually pull it off. That's what everyone's wondering. She glanced around the room. Half the folks here are betting you'll be gone by first frost. Others are willing to reserve judgment before Elaine could respond. Sheriff Mike Donovan joined them, a plate laden with food in his weathered hands. Mrs. Cooper. Welcome to Golden Fields. How are you settling in? We're managing, Sheriff. The community has been interesting. Interesting, he chuckled. Diplomatic way of putting it. Small towns take time to warm up. To newcomers, especially ones taking on challenges like the Miller property. Speaking of challenges, Cassie interjected. Did you tell her about the zoning meeting next Tuesday? The sheriff's expression sobered. Was getting to that. County commissions reviewing agricultural zoning regulations, rumor has it. Some developers are pushing for changes that would make it easier to convert farmland to commercial use. Let me guess. Elaine said Victor Hargrove is involved. His bank's been financing Midwest regional developments acquisitions. Sheriff Donovan confirmed, including purchases from farmers who've hit hard times, like putting farmers in situations where they'll hit hard times. Cassie added pointedly. The T-sheriff glanced around, then lowered. His voice between us. There's been talk about water rights, too. Anyone interested in large-scale development would need significant water access, like the deep wells on my property. Elaine asked, pieces falling into place. Both nodded solemnly. That Miller boy dug those wells deeper than anyone else in the county. Cassie explained. During the drought of '85, folk thought he was crazy, spending money he didn't have, but those wells never ran dry. A commotion at the entrance drew their attention. Victor Harrove stood in the doorway, his expensive suit incongruous amid the casual attire of the gathering. Richard Blackwell hovered behind him, like a shadow. Speak of the devil. Cassie muttered. Mayor Patterson approached the bankers with a politician's practice smile. Victor, what brings you to our community dinner? Don't often see Glenfield bankers at these events. Community outreach. Helen. Victor replied smoothly. The bank is committed to supporting agricultural initiatives in the region. His gaze swept the room, faltering momentarily when he spotted Elaine. Something flickered in his expression, surprise, perhaps annoyance, before his professional mask reasserted itself. The mayor gestured toward the food tables. Well, you're welcome to join. There's plenty of food to go around. Victor made his way through the crowd, stopping to shake hands and exchange pleasantries with various farmers. Elaine noticed how some greeted him warmly, while others maintained a careful music reserve politics. Sheriff Donovan murmured, Half the farms here have loans through First National, can't afford to snub the man who holds their mortgages. When Victor finally reached their group, he addressed Elaine with practiced cordiality. Mrs. Cooper. What? Accelerate your planting timeline if possible. The drive home was quiet. Tyler drowsy from excitement and sugar. Elaine's mind raced with new information and growing suspicions about Victor's interest in her property. Megan was waiting up when they arrived, trying to appear disinterested but clearly curious. How was the farmer social informative? Elaine replied, helping a sleepy Tyler toward his bedroom. We learned some interesting things about our property and why certain people might want it. After settling Tyler in bed, Elaine found Megan in the kitchen, laptop open to research about sunflower varieties. I've been looking into that phytoair remediation stuff, Megan admitted reluctantly. The science is actually pretty interesting. This variety here can extract heavy metals while producing commercially viable seeds. Elaine concealed her surprise at her daughter's initiative. What about soil preparation requirements? That's the thing. Megan turned the screen to show a detailed soil amendment formula. It needs specific mineral balances to maximize both the remediation effect and seed production. I was thinking we could test different amendment mixtures in small plots before committing to the whole field. That's actually brilliant, Elaine said. Genuinely impressed, Megan shrugged but couldn't hide her pleasure at the praise. It's just basic experimental design. My AP biology teacher was obsessed with agricultural applications. Would you be interested in leading that part of the project, the experimental plots? Megan looked up momentarily, dropping her teenage indifference seriously. Absolutely. You clearly understand the science better than I do. I mean, I guess I could, if you really need the help, despite her affected nonchalance. Megan's excitement was evident. I do need the help. We all need to contribute if this is going to work. Megan nodded slowly. I'll draw up a testing protocol tomorrow. She hesitated. So what did you find out tonight about why people want our land? Elaine explained what she'd learned about the water rights zoning changes and Victor's connection to the development company that had approached her. So the bank deliberately gave you land they thought was worthless. But actually once, for development, Megan summarized. That's seriously messed up. It is, and I intend to find out exactly what they're planning. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. Elaine was marking field sections with Gerald's help when a pickup truck bearing the County Agricultural Extension Office logo pulled into the driveway. Benjamin Foster stepped out accompanied by an older man. Elaine didn't recognize Mrs. Cooper. Benjamin called, approaching with obvious excitement. This is Dr. Gregory Palmer from the State Agricultural University. He's here about your grant application. Dr. Palmer, a distinguished man with silver hair and weathered hands that suggested practical farming experience alongside academic credentials, surveyed the property with professional interest. Mrs. Cooper, your application presents an intriguing case study and remediation potential. The committee was divided until I reviewed the historical soil samples from this property. Historical samples? Elaine questioned. The Extension Office maintains records going back decades, Dr. Palmer explained, including before the chemical degradation occurred. The subsoil composition here is quite remarkable, unusually rich in certain mineral deposits. Is that good news for our remediation efforts? Elaine asked. Potentially very good news. With proper techniques, this soil could not only be restored, but might actually support specialized crops with unique nutritional profiles. He gestured toward Gerald. Your mentor here understands this. It's why he's been advising you toward sunflowers as an initial remediation. Crop. Gerald's weather-beaten face remained impassive, but his eyes held a glint of satisfaction. The grant committee has approved your application, Benjamin announced, with a special provision for additional funding if initial results show promise. Elaine felt lightheaded with relief. That's thank you. This means everything to our project. Don't thank me yet. Dr. Palmer cautioned. The work ahead is substantial, and I understand. There are competing interests regarding this property. Victor Harov, Elaine said flatly. Dr. Palmer nodded. He called the university president yesterday, expressed concerns about allocating state resources to an unproven farmer with unrealistic expectations, and yet the grant was approved. Science outweighed politics in this instance. The potential research value of documented remediation on this specific soil composition was too significant to ignore. He smiled slightly. Also, Gerald here has considerable influence with certain committee members. Gerald shrugged off the implied praise. Palmer and I go back 40 years. He knows I don't waste words on lost causes. We'd like to install monitoring equipment, Benjamin explained, to track soil changes throughout the remediation process. The data would be valuable for similar projects elsewhere. Of course, Elaine agreed readily as they discussed technical details. Megan emerged from the house carrying her laptop and a notebook filled with diagrams. Tyler trailed behind her, clearly appointed as her assistant. I've mapped out 20 test plots with varying amendment formulas, Megan announced, then stopped short when she noticed the visitors. Oh, sorry to interrupt. Dr. Palmer's interest was immediately piqued. You must be Megan. Are those experimental design protocols? Megan nodded hesitantly. Just basic science. Different concentrations of amendments to determine optimal ratios for both remediation efficiency and sunflower productivity. The agricultural scientists studied her notes with growing appreciation. This is university-level experimental design. Remarkable for someone your age. Megan tried to suppress her smile, but failed. Biology is kind of my thing. She'll be managing our test plots, Elaine explained, proudly. While Tyler here is our designated chicken expert, chickens Benjamin questioned were starting a small flock. Tyler informed him seriously for eggs and natural pest control in the fields. It's part of our integrated farming system, Dr. Palmer laughed with genuine delight. Mrs. Cooper, it seems you have a complete agricultural team right here. He turned to Benjamin. Make a note that the Cooper farm should be classified as an educational demonstration project that opens up additional resource opportunities after the visitors departed with promises of equipment delivery. The following week, Gerald regarded Elaine with quiet approval. Told you that subsoil was special. You didn't tell me it was special enough to override Victor Harrow's influence. Elaine countered. Gerald's expression darkened. Don't underestimate that man. This grant is just the beginning. Once he realizes you're serious about making this farm work, he'll find other ways to pressure you. Let him try, Elaine said. With newfound confidence, we have science on our side and apparently an integrated agricultural team. Gerald chuckled. That you do. Speaking of which, that daughter of yours has a natural gift might want to nurture. That Elaine watched as Megan and Tyler continued. Mapping the field, their earlier city kid reluctance replaced by focused purpose. I intend to. That evening, as sunlight faded over the farmhouse, Elaine's phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Mrs. Cooper, Diana Wells from the Golden Fields Gazette. I understand your farm has received a special state remediation grant. Would you be interested? In discussing your plans for the property, Elaine hesitated only briefly. Actually, Ms. Wells, I'd be very interested in talking about the future of farming in Golden Fields, including the pressures small farms face from certain development interests. 2 days later, as Elaine and her children planted the first experimental sunflower plots, a copy of the Golden Fields Gazette lay on their porch. The headline read, Abandoned Farm Gets New Life. Innovative Remediation Project Challenges Development Plans. The battle lines had been drawn 6 weeks after planting the first experimental plots. The north field of Cooper Farm had transformed from barren wasteland to a patchwork of vibrant green sunflower seedlings, stood knee-high in neat rows, their leaves unfurling toward the summer sun. White markers identified Megan's test plots, each meticulously documented in spreadsheets that grew more complex by the day. Elaine wiped sweat from her brow as she adjusted an irrigation line. The grant money had allowed for essential equipment purchases, including a second-hand tractor that Tyler had proudly named Ferdinand, and a drip irrigation system designed to minimize water usage while maximizing plant health. Mom, Tyler called, running from the chicken coop he'd helped build. 3 more eggs today, that's 17 this week. Excellent. Elaine replied, genuinely impressed with the flock's productivity. What had begun as 6 hens had grown to 15, each carefully selected by Tyler for both egg production and temperament. The sound of approaching vehicles drew their attention. A familiar pickup truck, followed by Benjamin Foster's extension office car, pulled into the driveway. Gerald stepped out of his truck, nodding and greeting, while Benjamin began unloading monitoring equipment from his vehicle. Growth rate exceeds expectations, Gerald observed, surveying the field soils, responding better than I anticipated. Megan's experiments are showing significant variance between plots, Elaine explained, leading them toward the test area. The custom amendment mix in Section 4 is outperforming the standard formula by almost 30%. Benjamin looked impressed. The university team is eager to analyze the first soil samples. Dr. Palmer believes your results could influence remediation protocols. Statewide, Megan will be thrilled. She's been corresponding with Dr. Palmer about refinements to the testing parameters. Where is the budding scientist today? Gerald asked. At the library in Glenfield. She's researching companion planting options for next season. Elaine couldn't hide the pride in her voice. Her formerly phone-obsessed teenager now spent hours buried in agricultural journals and online research forums. As they inspected the fields, Benjamin shared updates from the county agricultural office. The monitoring equipment we're installing today will transmit data directly to the university. They're particularly interested in the rate of heavy metal extraction and the water testing. Elaine asked, still ongoing preliminary results. Confirm what? We suspected your aquifer is unusually pristine for this region. Despite the soil contamination, those deep wells are tapping into a protected water layer. Gerald nodded knowingly. Jim Miller was crazy, but he wasn't wrong about the water spent his last penny drilling those wells after helping Benjamin set up the monitoring equipment. Gerald pulled Elaine aside. Need to warn you about something. County zoning meeting is next week. Hargrove's people will be there in force. I've been preparing my statement. Elaine assured him Diana Wells from the Gazette provided background on previous rezoning attempts. Good, but that's not all. Gerald hesitated. Been hearing rumors about your mortgage. Elaine frowned. I don't have a mortgage. The property transfer satisfied the business debt might not be that simple. Check your original agreement carefully. Word is Harrow's looking for loopholes. The warning left. Elaine uneasy that evening after the children were occupied with their tasks. She dug out the property transfer documents and reviewed them meticulously buried in the fine print. She found a concerning clause: transfer subject to review, in the event of material change to property designation or usage. A cold feeling settled in her stomach. If the zoning changed from agricultural to commercial development, would that trigger the clause? Could the bank potentially reclaim the property? Her phone rang. Interrupting her thoughts, the caller ID showed Cassie Miller, Crossroads Diner. Elaine, just calling to confirm your start time tomorrow. Still good for the breakfast shift? Absolutely. Elaine assured her the part-time waitressing job had been a financial lifeline while they waited for the farm to become productive. 6 a.m. sharp. Perfect. And bring that son of yours if you want breakfast. Counter slow on Thursdays. He can do homework in the corner booth the next morning. Fog hung low over Golden Fields as Elaine and Tyler arrived at the Crossroads Diner. Summer vacation meant Tyler accompanied her on morning shifts, bringing along books and farm journals that had replaced his video games. Cassie greeted them with coffee for Elaine and hot chocolate for Tyler. Your usual corner booth is ready. Young man. Blueberry. Muffins in the warmer. As Tyler settled in, Elaine donned her apron and prepared for the morning rush. Over the past month, she'd come to appreciate the diner's role as the community's information hub. Farmers gathered for pre-dawn breakfasts, sharing news and weather predictions. Local officials stopped for coffee, and often inadvertently revealed details about upcoming decisions. Today, the counter seats filled quickly with regular customers. Samuel Winters from the farm supply store nodded respectfully, a significant change from their first interaction. James Wilson, her initially skeptical neighbor, now made a point of sitting in her section. Morning, Elaine. James greeted. Drove by your north field yesterday. Those sunflowers are coming along impressively. Thanks to your advice about the gallium amendments. Elaine acknowledged their relationship had evolved from skepticism to cautious respect over the weeks. Olivia sent these, James said, sliding a folder across the counter. Seed catalog is for next season. She marked some varieties that might do well in your regenerated soil. As the breakfast rush subsided, Sheriff Donovan entered, seating himself at the counter with a troubled expression. Cassie poured his coffee without being asked. What's got you looking like you lost your best hunting dog, Mike? She inquired. The sheriff glanced around before responding. Just came from a meeting with county commissioners. There's been a significant change to Tuesday's zoning agenda. Elaine, wiping down a nearby table, strained to hear. Midwest Regional's proposal has expanded. The sheriff continued quietly. Now includes a water bottling facility. They're citing job creation and tax revenue as justification for expedited approval. Cassie whistled softly. Let me guess. Proposed location centered on parcels adjacent to the old Miller property, now Cooper Farm. His eyes met Ela's. Briefly. They're specifically interested in access to the deep aquifer your wells tap into. Elaine abandoned any pretense of not listening. They can't force me to sell, can they? The sheriff sighed. Ordinarily, no. But if the reason zoning passes, there are legal mechanisms like eminent domain that could come into play for regional economic development. Convenient, Cassie remarked sarcastically. Right when the Cooper farm is starting to show progress, Sheriff Donovan nodded grimly. Development plans were likely in motion long before Mrs. Cooper acquired the property. Sheriff probably never expected her to actually succeed in farming it. Well, he miscalculated. Cassie declared, "Have you seen those sunflowers? And that girl of hers has half the agricultural department at the university impressed with her experiments." The sheriff turned to Elaine. "You should know there's already talk about offering you generous compensation if the reason zoning passes. Might be worth having a lawyer review your property documents." After her shift ended, Elaine sat with Tyler in the booth, her mind racing with implications. The diner had emptied except for Cassie, who brought over fresh coffee. "Might know someone who can help," Cassie offered. "My cousin practices property law in Glenfield, specializes in agricultural land disputes." "I'd appreciate that," Elaine said gratefully. Mom, Tyler interrupted, pointing toward the window. "Isn't that the man who wanted to buy our farm?" Charles Montgomery's black sedan was parked across the street, the man himself standing beside it, apparently. On a phone call when he spotted Elaine watching, he ended his call and approached the diner. Cassie's expression hardened. "Want me to tell him we're closed?" "No." Elaine decided I should hear what he has to say. Montgomery entered with practiced confidence, nodding politely to Cassie before addressing Elaine. "Mrs. Cooper, I was hoping to catch you. Do you have a moment? My son and I were just leaving." Elaine replied coolly, "This won't take long." He glanced at Tyler. Perhaps the young man would enjoy examining the classic car model in my vehicle while we chat. Tyler looked to his mother, who shook her head slightly. "My son stays with me." Mr. Montgomery, the development executive, seemed to reassess his approach very well. "I'll be direct. My company is prepared to substantially increase our offer for your property. The figure we're discussing would allow you to purchase a much more suitable home in Glenfield and establish a comfortable trust fund for your children's education." "Why?" The sudden generosity Elaine asked. "The regional development plan has accelerated. Your property is now central to a comprehensive economic initiative that would bring significant employment opportunities to the area." "You mean the water bottling facility?" Montgomery's smile faltered momentarily. "Among other elements, yes. The aquifer beneath your land is particularly valuable. It's valuable to my crops too." Elaine counted, "especially as they continue to remediate the soil your associates at First National Bank claimed was worthless." Mrs. Cooper, Montgomery's tone became patronizing. "You've made admirable progress with your experiment, but surely you recognize the greater economic benefit to the community from industrial development? The community seems divided on that point." Montgomery's pleasant facade slipped further. "The zoning commission will make their decision Tuesday. I'm offering you an opportunity to benefit generously rather than face potential eminent domain proceedings." Tyler, who had been quietly listening, suddenly spoke up. "You can't have our farm. Our sunflowers are already cleaning the soil, and next year we're going to grow special crops that nobody else can grow because of our special dirt." Montgomery regarded the boy with thinly veiled impatience. "Young man, farming is a business, not a science project." "It's both," Tyler insisted. "And our project is working," Dr. Palmer said. "So out of the mouths of babes," Cassie remarked from behind. The counter Montgomery straightened his tie. "My offer remains open until the zoning meeting. I suggest you consider your children's future carefully, Mrs. Cooper." After he left, Cassie shook her head disgustedly. "Threatening a single mother with her children's welfare, that's low. Even for Harrow's crowd." Elaine remained quiet. Montgomery's words echoing uncomfortably in her mind. Was she being selfish, refusing an offer that could secure her children's future? Or would surrendering now teach them the wrong lesson about perseverance and integrity? Mom, Tyler's voice pulled her from her thoughts. "We're not selling the farm, right? We just got our chickens named and everything." The simple question centered her. "No, honey, we're not selling, but we need to prepare for the zoning meeting. It's going to be a tough fight the following days." Passed in a whirlwind of activity, Megan, upon learning about the zoning threat, threw herself into preparing a scientific presentation about their remediation progress. Tyler created posters showcasing the farm's transformation with before and after photos he'd been diligently taking since their arrival. Elaine met with Cassie's cousin, the property lawyer, who identified several potential defenses against eminent domain claims based on the farm's new status as an agricultural research site. Diana Wells from the Gazette published a follow-up article detailing the Cooper farm's progress and raising questions about the transparency of the development plan's support. Came from unexpected quarters. James and Olivia Wilson organized a group of neighboring farmers concerned about water rights Samuel Winters offered his store as a meeting place for those opposed to the rezoning. Even Sheriff Donovan quietly provided insights about county procedures that might help their case the evening. Before the zoning meeting, Gerald and Dorothy McCormick arrived with casseroles and moral support. As they sat around the kitchen table, which now bore scratch marks from countless planning sessions and soil sample analyses. Gerald raised his coffee cup in a simple toast to the stubbornest woman in Golden Fields. He said with gruff affection, "Told you beginning was the easy part." Elaine smiled despite her anxiety, and not giving up is the hard part. "I remember worth fighting for," Gerald continued, gesturing toward the window where the sunflower field was visible in the evening light. "Not just the land, what you've built here, what you're teaching these young ones." Dorothy nodded in agreement. "This valley needs farms like yours. Ones that heal. The land, instead of just taking from it after they left, Elaine found Megan in her bedroom, practicing her presentation for the zoning commission. "How does it sound?" Megan asked, an unusual hint of vulnerability in her voice. "Impressive," Elaine assured her. "You explained the science clearly without talking down to the audience." Megan fidgeted with her notes. "What if they don't care about the science? What if all they see are dollar signs from that development project?" Elaine sat beside her daughter on the bed. "Then we appealed to the county commission and, if necessary, the state agricultural board. We've documented everything meticulously, thanks largely to you." "I didn't think I'd care this much," Megan admitted quietly. "About the farm, about what happens to the land, neither did I." Elaine confessed it was just a place to live at first, a consolation prize from people who thought they were cheating me, but now it's home. Megan concluded simply. The realization settled between them somewhere along the way. This struggling farm with its damaged soil and leaky roof had indeed become home, not just a shelter or a stepping stone to something better. Elaine hugged her daughter. "Get some sleep, tomorrow's going to be a long day." The Golden Fields Community Center parking lot overflowed with vehicles on Tuesday evening. Inside, the meeting room had been configured to accommodate the unexpectedly large turnout, with additional chairs hastily arranged along the walls at the front. The 5-member zoning commission sat behind a long table. Mayor Patterson occupied the center position, flanked by 2 farmers, a local business owner, and a retired school teacher. Their expressions revealed little as they reviewed documents before the meeting. Victor Hargrove sat in the front row alongside Charles Montgomery and a team of professionally dressed consultants. Their confident demeanor suggested they considered approval a foregone conclusion. Elaine entered with her children, momentarily overwhelmed by the crowd. Then Gerald McCormick raised a hand from midway back, where he had saved seats for them as they made their way forward. Elaine noticed familiar faces throughout the room. Farmers she'd served breakfast to customers from Winter's Farm Supply. Even parents of children Tyler had befriended at school. Mayor Patterson called the meeting to order. Due to the significant public interest in tonight's agenda, we'll begin with item 3. The proposed rezoning of agricultural parcels in the northeast quadrant for commercial development. Charles Montgomery approached the podium first, presenting a polished overview of the development plan complete with architectural renderings and economic projections. This project represents a $70 million investment in Golden Fields. He concluded creating over 200 permanent jobs and substantially expanding the tax base. Several consultants followed, each addressing specific aspects of the proposal: traffic impact, environmental considerations, infrastructure improvements. The presentation was comprehensive and professionally delivered, emphasizing benefits while minimizing potential concerns. When Montgomery's team finished, Mayor Patterson asked, "Are there community members who wish to speak regarding this proposal?" Several hands rose. The mayor nodded toward Elaine. "Mrs. Cooper, as your property would be directly affected, would you like to begin?" Elaine approached the podium, acutely aware of Victor Harov's calculating gaze following her. She placed her prepared notes on the surface, took a deep breath, and began to speak. "6 months ago, I was given a property that everyone in this room believed was worthless. 6 months ago, I was given a property that everyone in this room believed was worthless." Elaine began, her voice growing steadier. "With each word, it was handed to me as payment for a debt by First National Bank, represented by Mr. Hargrove, who is coincidentally supporting this development proposal. She gestured toward her children seated in the audience. My family and I arrived. With no farming experience, just determination and the need to make a new start. What we discovered was land that wasn't worthless at all, just wounded from years of chemical abuse and neglect. Elaine displayed photographs showing the farm's transformation, with guidance from neighbors like Gerald McCormick, scientific support from the State Agricultural University, and countless hours of hard work. We've begun healing this land. She presented soil test results, explaining the phyto-air remediation, a process. In clear, accessible terms, our sunflowers aren't just beautiful, they're extracting toxins while producing commercially viable seeds and oil. But that's just the beginning. Victor shifted uncomfortably as Elaine continued. The Agricultural University has designated our property as a research demonstration site because of its unique subsoil composition and extraordinary water quality, the same water this development plans to bottle and sell. But our vision extends beyond remediation. Once the soil is restored, we intend to establish a specialty crop operation that will create sustainable long-term agricultural jobs. This represents a different kind of economic development, one that preserves the agricultural character of Golden Fields. While creating value-added products, Elaine turned to face the audience directly. I understand progress is necessary, but should progress mean abandoning fertile farmland for commercial development? Once agricultural land is converted, it rarely returns. To farming, we're not just deciding about one property tonight. We're deciding what Golden Fields will look like for generations to come. She concluded by addressing the commission directly. I respectfully ask that you reject this rezoning proposal, not just for my family's sake, but to preserve the agricultural heritage that defines this community. Scattered applause followed as Elaine returned to her seat. Victor leaned over to whisper something to Montgomery, their expressions tense. Mayor Patterson acknowledged the next speaker, Elaine Cooper, who approached the podium with a tablet and noticeably nervous hands. I'm Elaine Cooper. She began, her teenage voice initially wavering before finding its strength. When my mom told us we were moving to a farm, I thought it was the worst thing that could possibly happen to me. This drew knowing chuckles from parents in the audience. I was wrong, Megan continued. At first, I was just trying to help because we needed this to work, but then I discovered something unexpected. The science of soil remediation is fascinating. She displayed graphs from her experimental plots. These show the heavy metal extraction rates from our test sections using different amendment formulas. The university researchers were so impressed with our results that they've incorporated our methods into their statewide protocols. Megan tapped her tablet, projecting a three-dimensional soil model. This visualization demonstrates how our remediation process is affecting soil layers at different depths. The blue areas represent contamination declining month by month. She addressed the commission with surprising authority. The development proposal claims minimal environmental impact, but their own assessment acknowledges potential aquifer contamination risks from industrial operations. Our farm is actively improving environmental conditions, while the proposed development introduces new risks. Megan's voice grew passionate. I'm 16 years old. In a few years, I'll be applying to colleges before moving here. I wanted to study fashion design. She smiled slightly. Now I'm planning to major in agricultural science, possibly with a focus on remediation techniques for damaged farmland. Her conclusion was simple but powerful. This farm changed my life. I'm asking you to give it the chance to keep changing lives, including the lives of other young people who might discover unexpected passions when given the opportunity to connect with the land. As Megan sat down, Elaine squeezed her hand, immensely proud of her daughter's poise and articulation. Tyler was next, his small figure barely visible behind the podium. My name is Tyler Cooper. I'm 9 years old, and I take care of the chickens on our farm. His straightforward introduction brought smiles to many, faces easing the tension in the room when we moved here. I was really mad about leaving my friends and my school. Tyler continued candidly, but then Mr. McCormick showed me how to collect eggs, and I got to name all our chickens, and now I help take care of them every day. He held up a homemade poster showing weekly egg production charts. Our chickens are really happy because they get to eat bugs from our fields, which is also good for our plants. It's called an integrated system. Tyler looked directly at the zoning commission members. If you change our farm into a factory, where will my chickens go? And the owls that live in our barn? And the butterflies that came back when we planted flowers for them. Several commission members appeared, visibly moved by the child's simple questions. My mom says, "We're not just growing plants, we're growing a future." Tyler concluded, "I think our future should have farms in it." Thank you for listening. More speakers followed. Gerald McCormick describing the historical significance of preserving agricultural land. Benjamin Foster explaining the scientific value of the ongoing remediation project. James Wilson expressing concerns about water rights for neighboring farms. If commercial extraction began, Diana Wells from the Gazette presented research on similar developments in other communities, noting patterns of unfulfilled economic promises and long-term environmental consequences. Victor Harrove requested an opportunity to respond. His usual polished demeanor seemed slightly strained as he addressed the commission. While these personal testimonials are certainly touching, they don't alter the economic realities. He argued the proposed development represents substantial investment in a region that has seen declining agricultural profitability for decades. He dismissed the Cooper Farm's progress as admirable but economically insignificant compared to the development's potential. One family's sentimental attachment to a property shouldn't outweigh the community's economic interests. The mayor allowed Charles Montgomery a brief follow-up. He emphasized job creation and tax benefits while questioning the long-term viability of the Cooper Farms approach. Specialty agriculture is notoriously risky. He cautioned the economic benefits of our proposal are guaranteed by binding agreements, not experimental farming methods, as the presentation portion concluded. Mayor Patterson called a 20-minute recess for the commission to review all materials before deliberation in the community center hallway. Supporters gathered around the Cooper family. Samuel Winters approached Elaine, his earlier skepticism completely transformed. "Never thought I'd see the day when a city woman would be standing up for farming in golden fields." He admitted, "You've proved a lot of us wrong." "Elaine, we haven't succeeded yet," Elaine reminded him. "You've already succeeded in ways that matter," Olivia Wilson interjected. "Look around you." Elaine surveyed the crowded hallway. Farmers, townsfolk, and even some Glenfield residents all engaged in passionate discussion about agricultural preservation and sustainable development. Whatever the commission decided, the community was now actively involved in determining its future. Dr. Palmer approached with Benjamin Foster. "Regardless of tonight's outcome, the university remains committed to supporting your remediation project." The scientist assured her the data alone is invaluable for similar efforts elsewhere. When the commission reconvened, Mayor Patterson called for order. "Before we begin deliberations, we have received new information that may be relevant to this matter." She nodded to Sheriff Donovan, who distributed documents to commission members. "These records," the mayor explained, "indicate that First National Bank, through a subsidiary, has already purchased options on several properties adjacent to the proposed development site, contingent on tonight's resonating approval." Murmurs spread through the audience as the implication became clear. The bank stood to profit substantially if the resonating passed. Additionally, Mayor Patterson continued, "We've received documentation indicating that Mrs. Cooper's property transfer included conditional language that could potentially revert ownership to the bank under certain circumstances, including zoning changes." Victor Harrove's face remained impassive, but his posture stiffened noticeably in light of these concerns about potential conflicts of interest. "I am recommending a 60-day postponement of this decision to allow for ethics review and complete disclosure of all financial relationships between involved parties." The motion passed unanimously, drawing applause from most attendees as the meeting adjourned. Victor approached Elaine, his expression tightly controlled. "Impressive performance," he said quietly. "But delaying tactics won't change the outcome. This development will proceed." "Why are you so determined to take my farm?" Elaine asked directly. "There are other properties available." Victor glanced around before responding. "The mineral composition in your subsoil isn't just good for farming, Mrs. Cooper. It contains trace elements valuable to certain manufacturing processes, elements that become accessible once the land is excavated for development." The revelation stunned her. "You knew this when you gave me the property. We assumed the remediation costs would be prohibitive for an individual owner." Victor admitted, "Your persistence has been unexpected, as has your transparency just now." Elaine observed, "Why tell me this?" Victor straightened his tie. "Because knowledge doesn't change reality. You still can't match the resources behind this development. Take the generous offer while it's available, Before Elaine could respond, Megan appeared at her side. "Mom, Dr. Palmer wants to discuss expanding our test plots. He thinks we should document the mineral content more thoroughly." The irony wasn't lost on Elaine, as Victor nodded stiffly and walked away the following morning. Elaine woke before dawn, her mind racing. With new information and possibilities, the 60-day postponement gave them breathing room. But Victor was right about one thing. They couldn't match the financial resources behind the development. She made coffee and stepped onto the porch watching. The first light touched the sunflower field. The plant stood nearly 6 ft tall now, their faces still days away from turning toward the sun. Tyler joined her sleepy-eyed but eager for his morning chicken duties. "Did we win, Mom?" "Not yet, buddy. We got more. Time to figure things out," Mr. McCormick says. "Sometimes is all you need for things to work out right." Elaine smiled at her son's simple wisdom. Let's hope he's right. Later that morning, Elaine met with Dr. Palmer and Gerald in her kitchen. The scientist spread geological survey maps across the table. Victor Harrove wasn't lying about the mineral deposits, Dr. Palmer confirmed. "They're called rare earth elements, crucial components in electronics manufacturing. This concentration is unusual for the region. Can they be extracted without destroying the farmland?" Elaine asked conventional. "Mining would essentially eliminate agricultural use," Dr. Palmer explained. "But there's emerging research on phytoextraction, using specific plants to draw elements to the surface." Over time, Gerald leaned forward, studying the maps like what we're already doing with the sunflowers and heavy metals. "Exactly, though with different plant varieties specialized for rare earth elements." Dr. Palmer looked thoughtful. "It would be slower than traditional mining, but potentially more sustainable, preserving agricultural capacity, while gradually harvesting valuable minerals, a dual-purpose farm." Elaine mused, growing crops while extracting minerals that could be periodically harvested. From plant material, Dr. Palmer nodded enthusiastically. "It's experimental, but the preliminary research is promising. We could establish a pilot program here with university backing. How soon could we demonstrate viability?" Ela asked, her mind already racing ahead. "That's the challenge," Dr. Palmer admitted. "Full proof of concept might take years, while the development proposal offers immediate economic returns. Unless," Gerald interjected slowly, "we could show dramatic results from our current remediation efforts, something concrete and immediate that demonstrates the land's potential." The sunflower harvest. Elaine realized it's coming sooner than expected. If the yield is exceptional, it would strengthen your position significantly. Dr. Palmer agreed, especially if combined with a proposal for this innovative dual-use approach over the next several weeks. The Cooper farm became a hive of activity. University researchers installed additional monitoring equipment to document both remediation progress and mineral content. Megan expanded her experimental plots, incorporating new varieties suggested by Dr. Palmer. Tyler added a second chicken coop, his flock now providing eggs for several local families. Elaine split her time between farm work, her shifts at the diner, and meetings with various experts to develop their counter-proposal to the development plan. Diana Wells published a series of articles explaining phytoextraction to the community, gradually building public understanding of the innovative approach as the sunflowers reached maturity, their golden faces tracking the sun across azure skies. Even skeptics had to acknowledge the beauty of the once barren field. Transformed visitors began stopping to photograph the vibrant display, inadvertently creating a small tourism boost for local businesses. Never seen anything like it. Samuel Winters admitted, surveying the sunflower field from Elaine's porch, "When you first talked about growing these, I figured we'd see patchy growth at best." Megan's experimental plots made the difference, Elaine explained. Her custom soil amendments accelerated both growth and toxin extraction. The approaching harvest created logistical challenges. Specialized equipment was needed, but the cost exceeded their remaining grant funds when Elaine mentioned this concern at the diner. "James Wilson overheard my brother in Nebraska has a sunflower harvester," he offered. "Been sitting idle since he switched to corn. Probably sell it cheap. If transportation could be arranged one by one." Such obstacles were overcome through community connections and resourcefulness. A local trucking company offered discounted rates to transport the harvester. Several farmers volunteered to help with the harvest itself. The Agricultural Extension Office provided storage facilities for the seeds, until processing could be arranged 2 weeks before the rescheduled zoning meeting. Dr. Palmer arrived with unexpected news. The preliminary results from your soil samples are remarkable, he announced. The reduction in contaminants exceeds our most optimistic projections. Your methods could revolutionize how we approach damaged farmland restoration nationwide. What about the rare earth elements? Elaine asked. Concentration confirmed. Dr. Palmer replied, the university is prepared to formally partner on a pedo extraction pilot program with substantial grant funding. We've drafted a proposal outlining economic benefits comparable to the development plan, but with preserved agricultural use for the first time since the zoning battle began. Elaine felt genuine hope they had a viable alternative that could potentially satisfy economic development needs while preserving the farm that evening. As sunset painted the sunflower field in hues of gold and amber, Elaine gathered with her children on the porch. We've come a long way, she observed, surveying their transformed property. Remember when you said this place was just temporary? Megan reminded her. Until you found a real job in Glenfield. Elaine laughed. Seems like another lifetime. Can we stay here forever? Tyler asked, leaning against his mother. I hope so, buddy, Elaine replied honestly. The harvest will tell us a lot about what's possible. As if on cue, Gerald's truck appeared on the driveway. The elderly farmer approached with uncharacteristic urgency. Weather Service just issued an alert. He announced without preamble, major storm system moving in faster than expected. Heavy rain, possible hail. Elaine felt her heart sink when tomorrow night we need to start harvesting immediately if we want to save the crop. She glanced at the vast field of sunflowers, their carefully planned harvest schedule suddenly compressed into hours instead of days. I'll make some calls. Elaine decided, reaching for her phone. Megan, contact Dr. Palmer. We'll need all hands for this. As darkness fell over Golden Fields, word spread rapidly through the farming community. A race against time had begun, one that would determine not just the fate of the Cooper farm, but potentially the future of agriculture in the entire valley. Dawn broke over Golden Fields with an ominous red sky. The air hung heavy with moisture, confirming Gerald's warning about the approaching storm. Elaine stood at the edge of her sunflower field, watching headlights approach along the rural roads, farmers responding to the emergency harvest call she'd put out the previous night. James Wilson arrived first, his pickup pulling a trailer with harvesting tools. Brought every hand I could find, he announced as workers piled out of several vehicles. My brother's harvester is still 8 hours away, but we can start cutting by hand in the most mature sections. Samuel Winters pulled up next, his truck bed loaded with collection bins. Stores closed today, he declared. This is more important. By sunrise, the Cooper farm bustled with activity. Farmers who had initially dismissed Elaine's efforts now worked alongside university researchers, following Megan's directions about which plots to prioritize. Tyler and several children from neighboring farms ran supplies and water to the workers. Dr. Palmer coordinated with a team taking final soil and plant samples before harvest. Even if we lose some of the crop, he assured Elaine, we've documented enough data to validate your methods. Dorothy McCormick organized a makeshift kitchen on the porch, coordinating food donations from townspeople who couldn't help with the physical labor. Cassie arrived with coffee urns and breakfast sandwiches from the diner on the house. She insisted community effort deserves community support. Mayor Patterson made an appearance mid-morning, surveying the operation with clear admiration. Impressive mobilization, she commented to Elaine. Reminds me of old times when farmers routinely helped each other through emergencies. I never expected such support, Elaine admitted, especially given how we were received initially. Golden Fields has a way of testing newcomers, the mayor replied with a knowing smile. But once you've proven your commitment, there's no stronger community. By noon, dark clouds gathered on the horizon. The teams worked with increasing urgency, cutting sunflower heads and loading them into collection bins without the specialized harvester. The process was labor-intensive, but the many hands made steady progress. Elaine worked alongside everyone else, ignoring her aching muscles as she moved through the rows nearby. Megan instructed university students on proper sampling techniques, her authority in this domain now unquestioned despite her age. Mom, Tyler called, running from the driveway. More people are coming. A convoy of vehicles approached residents from Glenfield and surrounding communities. who had read about the emergency harvest in Diana Wells' hastily published special bulletin among them, were families, retirees, and even teenagers looking to help. "We read about your farm in the Gazette," a woman explained as she and her husband joined. "A cutting team thought we'd come see it for ourselves and lend a hand by mid-afternoon." The first raindrops began to fall. Gerald consulted the weather radar on Benjamin's tablet. Storms, accelerated heavy bands approaching from the southwest. "How much time?" Ella asked, surveying the remaining unharvested sections. "Sour, maybe less before it hits full force." James assessed their progress. "We've harvested about 60%. The most mature sections are secure. My brother just crossed the county line with the harvester," Olivia added, "but he won't make it before the storm." Elaine faced a difficult decision. The hand harvesting was proceeding steadily, but would never complete the field before the storm. The remaining sunflowers represented not just valuable seeds but crucial data for their remediation documentation. "We need to prioritize," she decided. "Dr. Palmer, which remaining test plots are most critical for your research?" The scientist indicated several sections. "These represent our most promising remediation formulas. The data from these would significantly strengthen our case. James, can you redirect? Teams to those areas will sacrifice the rest if necessary as workers." Redistributed according to the new priorities, the wind increased noticeably. The tall sunflowers swayed their heavy heads, becoming more difficult to cut cleanly. "Mom," Megan approached, raindrops speckling her determined face. "I have an idea for the sections we can't harvest. If we can quickly cut and lay the stalks down in a specific pattern, they'll protect the soil from erosion during the storm. The seeds will be lost for commercial purposes, but they'll reseed naturally for next season, making the best of a bad situation." Gerald nodded approvingly. Smart thinking. They implemented Megan's plan, with teams now divided between priority harvesting and strategic stalk laying. The rain intensified and thunder rumbled in the distance. Elaine glanced up to see an unexpected vehicle approaching. Charles Montgomery's black sedan, followed by a news van from the regional television station. "What now?" she muttered, wiping rain from her face as she went to meet the unwelcome visitor. Montgomery emerged with an umbrella, surveying the mud-splattered workers with poorly concealed disdain. "Quite the primitive operation you have here, Mrs. Cooper." "We're fighting against time," Ella replied curtly. "What do you want?" "I was bringing a news crew to document the innovative development plan for this area," he explained, gesturing to the journalists setting up cameras. "Despite the weather, found this dramatic scene instead. Thought you might appreciate the publicity for your valiant effort." The condescension in his tone was unmistakable. "Your timing is impeccable," Elaine remarked dryly. "Nothing says photo opportunity like a community racing against a storm." To her surprise, Montgomery nodded thoughtfully. "Actually, that's precisely what makes compelling television, the human element struggle against nature." Behind him, the news crew was already filming the harvesting operation, clearly captivated by the unexpected story unfolding before them. "Where's Victor?" Elaine asked. "I'd have expected him to witness our presumed failure firsthand." "Meeting with investors," Montgomery replied vaguely. "He sends his regards." A sudden gust of wind nearly toppled a stack of collection. Bins workers rushed to secure them as the rain intensified. "If you'll excuse me," Elaine said, "we have work to do." As she turned away, Montgomery called after her, "Our offer still stands, Mrs. Cooper. Think about it. While you're battling the elements." The next hour passed in a blur of intensifying weather and determined labor. The television crew, rather than simply observing, set down their equipment and joined the harvesting effort, their presence documenting the community's response in a way Montgomery clearly hadn't anticipated. The reporter, a woman named Rachel Stevens, worked alongside Elaine, cutting sunflower heads. "This is remarkable," she commented. "When was the last time you saw people from 3 counties coming together like this?" "Never," Elaine admitted. "I didn't think it was possible." "Mind if I interview you when there's a break in the action?" This story goes well beyond a zoning dispute. As the storm's full force approached the final priority, sections were harvested just as visibility began to deteriorate. Gerald called out over the howling wind, "We need to get everyone to shelter. Storm's intensifying." Workers hurried to secure harvested materials in the barn, while the last teams implemented Megan's erosion prevention strategy in the remaining fields. The television crew captured dramatic footage of farmers working through sheets of rain, determined expressions on mud-streaked faces inside the crowded farmhouse. People dried. Off with towels Dorothy had collected, the mood was surprisingly upbeat. Despite the storm now raging outside, preliminary count shows over 70% harvested. James reported focusing on the priority areas was the right call. Dr. Palmer analyzed the day. Samples with portable equipment. The early results are extraordinary. He announced oil content in the seeds is significantly higher than standard varieties and toxin extraction rates exceeded our projections by nearly 40%. What does that mean for? The farm mayor Patterson asked. It means Dr. Palmer explained that the Cooper farm has demonstrated the most successful remediation case study in the state's history. The data will revolutionize how we approach contaminated agricultural land, Rachel Stevens, the reporter, captured these statements on camera. Her professional detachment giving way to genuine amazement at the scientific significance as the storm reached its peak. Elaine found a moment of quiet in the kitchen, watching rainwater, trace patterns down the window glass. Cassie joined her, offering a cup of hot coffee. "Penny, for your thoughts," the diner owner said. "Just trying to process everything." Elaine replied this morning. "I was worried about losing our harvest. Now we have a television crew documenting our success and a house full of people who turned out to help us. People appreciate authenticity," Cassie observed. "You didn't come here with grand promises or schemes. You just got your hands dirty and did the work. Folks respect that." Eventually, through the kitchen doorway, Elaine could see Megan explaining soil science to fascinated university students, Tyler demonstrating his chicken care charts to neighborhood children, and a mix of farmers and townspeople sharing food and conversation as if they'd known each other for years. It's more than just saving a crop, Elaine realized aloud today, showed what this community can be when united around something meaningful. The storm continued through the night, but the next morning broke clear and brilliant. The damage was less severe than feared. Some sunflowers had been flattened, but Megan's erosion prevention strategy had worked, keeping the soil largely intact. The regional news broadcast led with the Cooper farm story, showcasing the community harvest effort alongside interviews with Dr. Palmer, explaining the scientific significance of the remediation project. Rachel Stevens' report emphasized the innovative approach that preserved agricultural use. While addressing environmental damage, this isn't just about one farm, the reporter concluded her segment. It's about reimagining the relationship between community land and sustainable development. By mid-morning, Elaine's phone rang constantly, with calls from other media outlets, agricultural organizations, and even a representative from the governor's office, interested in the remediation methods. The unexpected publicity had transformed their local zoning dispute into a statewide conversation about land use and environmental restoration. 3 days later, with the harvested sunflower seeds properly dried and stored, preliminary yield calculations were complete. Dr. Palmer called an impromptu meeting at the farm, bringing university officials and agricultural extension representatives. The results are unprecedented. He announced displaying charts comparing the Cooper farm yields to state averages, both in terms of seed quantity per acre and oil content quality. "Your crop has broken records for remediation-based agriculture." By how much? Gerald asked, his usual stoicism giving way to evident curiosity. 38% above previous documented cases, Dr. Palmer replied. "This isn't a marginal improvement. It's a breakthrough that validates the approach." At commercial scale, the university's agricultural dean added, "We're prepared to expand our partnership substantially. The phytoextraction program for rare earth elements could begin immediately with guaranteed funding for at least 5 years." "What about the zoning meeting next week?" Benjamin asked, voicing the concern on everyone's mind. The dean smiled. "The governor's office has expressed interest in designating the Cooper farm as a state agricultural innovation site. Such a designation would supersede local zoning authorities." The news brought stunned silence, followed by excited conversation about the implications. Elaine stepped outside to process this unexpected development, finding Gerald already on the porch, gazing at the remaining sunflowers glowing golden in the afternoon light. "Did you know this would happen?" she asked the elderly farmer. "When you first suggested sunflowers," Gerald shook, "mirrored their family's journey. What had begun as a desperate last resort had become their passion and purpose. We should head back to the festival. Elaine suggested the governor's representative wanted to discuss expanding the innovation zone designation. As they walked toward the car, a familiar pickup truck approached along the driveway. Gerald McCormick rolled down his window as he pulled alongside them. "Figured I'd find you out here," he said, checking the fields instead of enjoying the celebration. "Old habits," Elaine admitted with a smile. Gerald studied her for a moment. "Told you that day when you first arrived, beginning's the easy part, not giving up is the hard part." He gestured toward the thriving farm around them. "You did the hard part, both of you. We had help." Elaine reminded him, from so many others. "Community support matters," Gerald acknowledged, "but it starts with someone willing to see possibility where others don't." He nodded toward the sunflower field, glowing golden in the fading light. "Someone willing to plant seeds in soil." Everyone else called dead as they returned to the festival, where the entire town now celebrated the agricultural renaissance their worthless farm had sparked. Elaine reflected on the banker's mockery that had started their journey. Victor Hargrove had handed her land he believed had no value, intending it as the final humiliation in her financial downfall. Instead, it had become the foundation of a new beginning for her family, for the land itself, and for an entire community that had rediscovered its agricultural heritage through innovation and persistence. The Cooper farm stood as living proof that sometimes life's most valuable opportunities arrive disguised as disasters, and that determination can transform even the most barren ground into fields of gold. The following morning, as dawn broke over golden fields, Elaine sat on her porch with a cup of coffee, watching the sun illuminate her sunflower fields. The day would bring more visitors, more questions from farmers looking to implement similar methods, more requests for interviews and demonstrations. But for this quiet moment, she simply appreciated the journey that had brought them here, from desperate city refugees to pioneering farmers whose methods were revitalizing agricultural communities across the state. The land once mockingly handed to her as worthless had proven to be the most valuable payment she could have received, not just for its agricultural productivity or the mineral wealth beneath its surface, but for the purpose, community, and future it had provided for her family. As the first rays of sunlight caught the golden faces of the sunflowers, Elaine smiled at the simple truth she had discovered in golden fields. Value isn't always apparent at first glance. Sometimes it must be revealed through vision, nurtured through persistence, and harvested with conviction. The Cooper farm hadn't just broken harvest records. It had broken the cycle of limited thinking that had initially dismissed both the land and the city. Woman who dared to believe it could flourish again. In doing so, it had written a new chapter, not just for one family, but for an entire community, learning to see the hidden potential in what others had abandoned as worthless. Up next, 2 more incredible stories are waiting for you right on your screen. If you enjoyed this one, you won't want to miss this. Just click to watch, and don't forget to subscribe.